Mr. Jenis, seconded by Ms. Rempel, moves that the House, A, recognize the good work being done by Canada's Office of Religious Freedom, in particular its work within the Department of Global Affairs to build the department's capacity to address threats to religious freedom and to directly promote peace, freedom, tolerance, and communal harmony, and as a consequence, B, call on the government to renew the current mandate of the office, since the continuation of its vital work is needed now more than ever. The honourable member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
On May 16, 1919, Molly Pinto was born in Karachi, Pakistan, then part of Greater India. Her family were originally from Goa, a Portuguese colony on the west coast of India, which had and continues to have a large Catholic population. She grew up in a Goan Catholic colony in Karachi. She remembers a very happy childhood, one populated by children and then young adults from all different ethnic and religious communities, Goan as well as indigenous Pakistani Christians, Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, Jews, etc. Various languages were spoken: English, Konkani, the Goan language, Urdu, Hindi, etc. She recalls how people from different communities shared meaningful friendships. They would bring sweets to their Muslim neighbors at Christmas time, and their neighbors would bring them sweets for Eid. Mr. Speaker, Molly Pinto is my wife's grandmother, and the Pakistan that she grew up in looked a lot like Canada looks today. Those on the left and on the right who are willing to casually label religious intolerance as part of the culture or religion in Pakistan do not know their history, because countries like Pakistan had a rich tradition of multicultural, multilingual, multi-faith cooperation long before Canada even existed, and that tradition continued into the living memory of many who are still with us today. Some members of this House, I am sure, remember that history from their own experience and hope and pray for a return to it. Molly remembers how increasing tensions emerged during partition when India and Pakistan achieved their independence and separated from each other. Her perception was that when people who had been pushed out of other places in present-day India came to Pakistan, often after seeing or experiencing violence at home, they brought a level of suspicion and tension that felt alien in what had previously been an idyllic setting. Still, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the founder of Pakistan, was very clear about the need to continue Pakistan's pluralistic traditions after independence. Like Molly, Jinnah was born in Karachi. His family were Gujarati Shia Muslims, and as a Shia, Jinnah was in many senses part of a religious minority as well, and he also attended Christian schools. Jinnah had a vision for Pakistan that made the protection of minorities central to its success. Pakistan adopted a flag which clearly demonstrated his vision: a green section to represent the Muslim majority and a white stripe for the minority communities. Here is what Muhammad Ali Jinnah said in an address to the Constituent Assembly of Pakistan in 1947. You are free. You are free to go to your temples. You are free to go to your mosques or to any place of worship in this state of Pakistan. You may belong to any religion or caste or creed. That has nothing to do with the business of the state. We are starting in the days where there is no discrimination, no distinction between one community and another, no discrimination between one caste or creed and another. We are starting with this fundamental principle that we are all citizens and equal citizens of one state. Mr. Speaker, on September 9th, 1968, Clement Shahbaz Bhatti was born in Lahore, Pakistan. He would go on to become the country's first federal minister for minority affairs. In 1979, when Shahbaz was 11 years old, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. This event would have a consequential impact on world affairs in Pakistan and in the life of Shahbaz Bhatti. Western aid and aid from other Muslim countries was funneled through Pakistan to support the Mujahideen in their jihad against the Soviet Union. The Mujahideen defeated the Soviets, but Pakistan paid a heavy price for their involvement because of the significant injection of extreme and intolerant ideas that came with the Mujahideen and the subsequent rise of the Taliban. The rise of extremism in Iran as well had a negative effect on Pakistani pluralism. Importantly, none of these developments in the Muslim world were inevitable. They reflected the push and pull of history, perhaps some policy mistakes, perhaps some policy decisions which were necessary in their time but had unintended consequences. Either way, the evident decline of pluralism in Pakistan was not inevitable, and it is not irreversible. Now, Shahbaz Bhatti knew that. As Federal Minister for Minorities in Pakistan, he visited Canada. He came here in February of 2011, the month before his assassination. He met with the former Prime Minister as well as other ministers. He knew then how vulnerable he was. His visit followed on the heels of the assassination of Governor Salman Taseer, a Pakistani Muslim who, like Shahbaz, was an outspoken critic of Pakistan's blasphemy laws used to target religious minorities. And it was Shahbaz's legacy and the advocacy work of his family here in here in Canada, which led the previous Conservative government to act to create the Office of Religious Freedom. Not some theoretical political statement about abstract rights, but, Mr. Speaker, an office that would and which has made a real difference for real people in Pakistan and all around the world. So what is the Office of Religious Freedom? The Office of Religious Freedom was established as a division of Foreign Affairs, now Global Affairs, in the last Parliament. And incidentally, the creation of this office was announced inside a mosque. Now, the office has an annual budget of $5 million, which I don't think I need to tell this House is a very modest sum in the scheme of things. This is 1/180th of the cost of the government's recent changes to public sector sick leave, and it's well underneath the cost of renovating 24 Sussex Drive. Now, this office does three main things. First of all, it provides training to the public service. And this training is crucial to help our public servants understand underlying religious tensions and how to advance human rights and Canada's interests in the context of these dynamics. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has said, "If I went back to college today, I think I would major in comparative religion, because that's how integrated it is in everything that we are working on and deciding and thinking about today." Helping Canada's foreign policy be informed by an understanding of religious tensions is critical in the current environment. Secondly, this office does direct advocacy, speaking out about and bringing attention to the plight of persecuted religious minorities. And thirdly, this office funds direct, on-the-ground projects with local partners in countries like Pakistan, projects which advance religious freedom, and that is in fact where most of the budget goes. Now, this office has had considerable success. You don't have to take my word for it. Here's what the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Consular Affairs, the member for Mississauga Centre, had to say recently about the work of the office in one theatre in Ukraine. The member said, "As a part of the broader efforts to cultivate long-term stability, tolerance, and respect for human rights, including freedom of religion or belief, Global Affairs Canada, through the Office of Religious Freedom, is supporting two projects in Ukraine to promote interfaith dialogue and to strengthen the capacity of local authorities to respond to hate crimes." As the honourable member is aware, the Office of Religious Freedom has advocated on behalf of religious communities under threat, opposed religious hatred and intolerance, and promoted pluralism and respect for diversity abroad. The quote continues, "As the Minister of Foreign Affairs has already stated repeatedly, we are grateful for Dr. Andrew Bennett's service as the head of the Office of Religious Freedom and for his ingenuity, sensitivity, and competency over the past 3 years." So very high praise, clearly, for this office from the member for Mississauga Centre. And here's what the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the member for West Vancouver, Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky Country, had to say recently about the work of the office in Nigeria. She said, "In its efforts to combat Boko Haram's history of intercommunal violence in the region, Canada, through the Office of Religious Freedom, supported a 2-year project to promote interfaith dialogue and conflict mediation in Plateau State, Nigeria. We are well aware of the good work it has done. The project successfully developed a community-based mechanism to help diffuse tensions between different religious and ethnic groups, and has been used by the Nigerian government on various occasions, including in response to attacks and bombings in Jos and in the lead-up to Nigeria's elections in March of 2015. While this phase of the project concluded in January 2015, our government is pleased that Canada has been able to continue to support this model for intercommunal dialogue in neighbouring conflict-affected regions in Nigeria." These are words from the member for West Vancouver, Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky Country. And listening to those eloquent words, I may say, from Liberal members, you might wonder, who could possibly be opposed to this office? Who could possibly oppose this clearly good and necessary work? Given the evidence and given this good work, you might be inclined to think that it would be obvious that this office should be renewed. And I think, Madam Speaker, that it is obvious. But there have been critics, and it's important, I think, to take this opportunity to respond to some of the arguments that critics have made. First of all, there are some who seem to have something of an allergy to any office of government which uses the word religion. They react negatively to any reference to religion in the context of government action. So let's be very clear about this. This office is not about promoting religion. It's about promoting religious freedom. These are two fundamentally different things. Now, Western democratic governments are, of course, not in the business of promoting religion, but all governments have to be in the business of protecting freedom, including freedom of religion. Notably, those who ask for state non-interference in religion are themselves expressing support for religious freedom. Now, religious freedom, of course, includes atheists. It includes the right not to believe. In fact, atheists have direct representation on the Office of Religious Freedom's External Advisory Committee. The right to believe as a non-believer is frankly one of the most threatened expressions of religious freedom in the world today. Canada's Office of Religious Freedom advocates for atheists in countries like Bangladesh, where they are particularly vulnerable. And freedom of religion is not a strictly religious idea. It is recognized in Article 18 of the UN Charter, which says, "Everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes freedom to change one's religion or belief, and freedom, either alone or in community with others, and in public or private, to manifest this religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance." Now, if not about religion as such, what is freedom of religion all about? Well, I think the UN Charter has it right. Freedom of religion is fundamentally about freedom of thought. The freedom to think about your fundamental purpose, to think about your place in the universe, and then to act that out how you see fit. And this freedom of thought is clearly essential to the human experience. Freedom of religion is about so much more than the phenomenological elements of religion. It is, in fact, something entirely different in kind. Again, this office exists to promote religious freedom, the kind of freedom of thought identified in the UN Charter. It is not about promoting religion. Now, a second objection that we've heard is from those who say that human rights are universal, interdependent, and indivisible, and therefore they do not see a need for a separate Office of Religious Freedom. Now, of course, we can all agree that rights are interdependent and indivisible, but we are also well served by centers of excellence within government and within the Department of Global Affairs, which focus on specific areas. To name another example, we have a Department for the Status of Women. Certainly human rights are universal, interdependent, and indivisible, but we still have, and we should have, a department that focuses specifically on the status of women. Now, why is it important that we have these types of centers of excellence? Because to have all types of rights lumped together risks a situation in which no one is focused upon individual specific areas of rights and rights violations. Without specific centers of excellence, individual areas that need attention can risk getting lost in one murky, interdependent, and indivisible soup. And interdependence and indivisibility have never before been used as arguments against some degree of specialization. The natural sciences are interdependent and indivisible, yet we are still well served by having those who specialize in chemistry, biology, physics, and indeed in subparts of each. Now, a third objection we've heard is from those who say that this is merely a political ploy. The creation of the office was designed for so-called pandering to ethno-cultural diaspora communities in Canada. A writer for iPolitics said in 2013, "Diaspora politics can become a double-edged sword if left in the hands of politicians. As evidence, look no further than the new Office of Religious Freedom, a policy outcome one might expect when parties curry favor with particular ethnic constituencies." Now, I must say, Madam Speaker, that there was something very dark about these kinds of arguments. So-called ethnic constituencies have as much right to expect that their priorities are reflected in government policy as anyone else. It is true that new Canadians are more likely, I should say, to have ongoing personal and familial connections to those facing religious persecution in other countries, tend to be particularly supportive of this office. But to describe policies which reflect the priorities of new Canadians as pandering is unnecessarily pejorative, and it is a unique kind of pejorative tone often used to denigrate policies which are important to new Canadians. But it is certainly also true that this policy isn't just important to new Canadians. Members of diaspora communities, which have been in Canada for generations, and really all Canadians, can see the value of the work that is being done here. A fourth objection that we have heard is from those who suggest that this office is supposedly just about Christians and the preferencing of Christian concerns in international affairs. Of course, of note, Mr. Speaker, should be the fact that this objection and the previous objection are in fact mutually exclusive, and yet are often made simultaneously by the same people. This office couldn't possibly be both about focusing on Christians and also aimed at new ethnocultural communities. But it will be evident to anyone who looks at the list of projects that this office supports that it works with and for a wide range of different communities. For example, a recent project gave $290,000 to the Aga Khan Foundation for development and distribution of children's books that promote pluralism among school-aged children in Bangladesh. Working through a Muslim organization, this project also particularly is important to the atheist community who face growing persecution in Bangladesh, as mentioned. And non-Christian groups, in fact, Sikh, Jewish, and Muslim leaders in Canada, have taken the lead on calling for the renewal of this office. Earlier this year, representatives from these three communities sent a joint letter to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, pleading with him to do the right thing and to renew this office. And a vast range of communities are represented on the office's External Advisory Committee. Muslims, Jews, Sikhs, Buddhists, Christians, and yes, atheists are represented on the External Advisory Committee as well. But I'll also say, with respect to this objection, it is important to note that this office does provide some support to some Christians, because Christians are indisputably one of the most persecuted religious communities anywhere in the world. Long-standing Christian communities which have existed in the Middle East since almost the time of Christ, since long before Christianity spread to Western Europe or certainly North America, these communities are under intense pressure, which includes, in various cases, systematic discrimination, growing cultural bias, regular violence, and even attempts at total extermination. These people happen to share a faith with Western colonizers, but these indigenous Christian communities bear no responsibility whatsoever for colonization. They have as much right to live in peace and security as anyone else. And when I talk to other non-Christian faith groups, strikingly, they often raise the increasingly desperate plight of Christians as a matter of significant concern. CIJA, the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, for example, has been vocal in support for the plight of persecuted Christians, and we should listen to what they have to say in this respect. Now, this office does not focus uniquely on Christians, but it does not ignore them either. A fifth and final objection that I hear to the Office of Religious Freedom is that its work is in some way colonialist. A recent commentary piece in the Toronto Star said, "The international promotion of religious freedom by Western states risks repeating civilizing colonial missions, imposing fixed standards without sensitivity to cultural and historic specificities." But, Mr. Speaker, those who suggest that the good work that this office is doing to advance religious freedom is somehow about advancing narrowly Western values clearly don't understand the work of this office or the context in which it operates. This office does not seek to dictate to other countries. It works with and provides vital support for programs on the ground. It works with local leaders and leverages local knowledge. And that is why it has earned such high praise from diaspora communities and others with whom it directly works. As I have said, this is not about Western values. It is about universal human values, laid out very clearly in Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And those who object to the promotion of religious freedom on the grounds that it is a, quote, Western value are often the same people who have the same objections to efforts to advance gender equality, democracy, and other principles of human society which have long been recognized as universal. Because of my family's connection to Pakistan, I can speak best to our work in that country. And very clearly, we are not interested in promoting some Western construction of what Pakistan should be. We want to see the restoration of the pluralistic Pakistan that my wife's grandmother, Molly, grew up in. This was her reality. This was Muhammad Ali Jinnah's vision, and this was Shahbaz Bhatti's dream, the restoration of Pakistan's historic traditions, not the imposition of Western ones. When it comes to this office, the government has refused to give a clear answer, but with 10 days to go until the current mandate runs out, it's high time they communicate their decision, and this motion is necessary to give people working in this area the clarity that they need. Most importantly, people who rely on this office are waiting for an answer. If the government recognizes the good work of this office, will they simply say yes so that the work can continue uninterrupted? And if they are determined to kill this office, could they at least explain why? Could they at least give us some kind of a reason? 2 weeks ago, I attended a commemoration held in Toronto to honor Shabazz Bhatti. And there I met Rimsha Massa, a Christian teenager who was accused of blasphemy in Pakistan and only found safety after being spirited away to Canada. I think of my wife's grandmother's reality as a child in pluralistic Pakistan, and I think now of Rimsha's reality with the challenges facing Pakistan. And this is why this work and this motion matter so much. For 1/4 of the cost of the recent member's office budget increase, this office is saving lives and giving hope to people like her. So I urge members to reflect on the good work this office is doing and to please support this motion. Thank you.